Hello, everybody. Today I'm going to be sharing with you my journey on moving out of a scarcity mindset and into an abundance mindset. And I'm going to be sharing open and honestly the books and resources that helped me the most here today on this podcast, and also just a little bit about my background and why this has how this has shown up in my life. So and specifically how it has shown up as an artist as well, but this could apply to anyone. So I me and money it has been a lifelong challenge, fear of scarcity, fear of, not making enough money, fear of not having enough money, fear of not knowing what to do with whenever I get the money, or how to manage it, or feeling like I am dumb whenever it comes to money. And I grew up in a kind of tumultuous, had a bit of a tumultuous childhood, and started out very much in poverty, or yeah, scarcity. My mom was a very young mom, and she, kind of divorced my father very early on, and then she married into more financial stability, but that was a very abusive relationship anyways. And so she was very brave and got herself out of that situation, but she also had three children and now was a single mother again, with three little ones. And so I know, there was quite anyway. So my childhood was filled with lots and lots and lots of financial challenges. And even whenever she remarried, they still had a lot of financial challenges. And like everybody, nobody comes out of childhood like unscathed, right? And so some of my scarcity, issues with abundance and money management and scarcity mentality, all of it comes from childhood. My fears around managing money comes from childhood, and feeling like I wasn't qualified to manage money. And so, and then I decided to, follow my dream and become an artist. And I mean, you can't be around people who are more terrified to talk about money and deal with business and and talk about selling and are afraid of selling usually than a group of artists. And there was also a lot of kind of pressure in groups of artists to not be interested in such things, to not talk about such things. Yet, whenever you were selling and making money, then you also got judged for that as well. And so it has been, let me tell you, my whole life, this thing called money has been an issue. It has been, definitely a big, big learning curve for me and a really big edge in my life. And I feel like for those things that are that way for us, those are the things that I believe we most come here to learn and we most come here to master. And so once I started making more money as an artist in my business and was having a lot of success with that, I built up a lot. And then I also had a lot of, after COVID ended, like my business really kind of boomed during COVID. And then after COVID ended, then it contracted. But instead of understanding that, oh, that was just the nature of the situation, that was, I was set up running an online teaching business before COVID even hit. And so I was set up to be able to benefit from that. Um, I hate to say luck, because it was a terrible situation for so many people. And, instead of my business receding at that time, it expanded. And after that, it began to contract. And I, because of my scarcity mentality and my lack of belief in myself, in my skills, whenever it came to money management, believing that I was no good with money, not good with money, didn't know how to deal with money, didn't know how to manage it. I went into like a lot of self doubt. Um, it felt like a huge failure to me. I felt like I had made so many mistakes. I felt like it was all my fault, and I really blamed myself, for so much of it, even though really that was not the truth, right? Like, yes, mistakes were made. I hired a marketing agency that was doing Facebook ads for me anyways, and they ended up making big mistakes on the Facebook ads, and they ended up spending, multiple thousands of dollars. We're talking in the, uh, five figures here of money out of my business bank account for these Facebook ads simply because they fumble fingered a number into the ads. Okay. And they still use me as a case study on their website, just so you know, is like one of their big successes, which was not true because they basically the numbers were never accurate that they were reporting. So the success that they said that I was having, I was not having. Anyways, so, and then that money was gone. It was gone. I didn't seek legal action or anything like that, but that was kind of like the final, like, straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. That was kind of the final initiation for me that happened at that time. Um, and I kind of, I don't want to say necessarily I went into a depression, but it was really, really hard for me to deal with that level of what I perceived at the time as a failure on my part for not catching that, for not catching their mistake, or watching my money close enough to be able to catch that. So I'm this is a very, I'm being very honest here, very vulnerable about all of this and sharing all of this with you all in hopes that if you also are dealing with these sorts of things, that I hope that this helps you. I hope that the resources that I share with you today, and now that I feel like I'm, more on the other side of this and more in a healthy place with my mindset around, abundance and money and trust. Because the way that I grew up was like, it was very survival based, very scarcity based. I mean, as kids, we would be encouraged to go and dumpster dive in order to get cans, just to give you an idea. Like, to find, aluminum cans that we could cash in for a little bit of money. So when there was money, there wasn't a lot of money, and I was taught to believe that, you had to work super, super hard. And the only way that you could get money was to kind of trade your time for money. So anyways, I won't go into all of that, the whole backstory, but hopefully that gives you some kind of context from, just to where I'm coming from as a human being, and how as how in my 40s I ended up recognizing, like, whoa, this is a really big issue in my life, and it's time for me to really face it head on. And so that's what I decided to do. I decided to, as challenging, and it's what I'm still doing because I still have challenges around this. But I decided a couple of years ago, like, I'm going all in on this. I really want to understand how to cultivate an abundance mindset. And I want to kind of reparent myself around money management and rebuild, my own self-esteem and empower myself around my money. Oh, it has been a couple of years doing a really, really deep dive into this. And I can't even tell you like how many courses I've taken, how many books I've read, know. And so today I'm going to be sharing with you the things that I've done that I feel, and all of it was necessary, right? So, but I'm just going to be picking out the top ones that are top of mind for me that I really felt like made the most difference for me in terms of either shifting my perspective, or practical things that I did in order to uh, gain a sense of empowerment around money management and around feeling worthy of abundance and feeling knowing and trusting that I have always been taken care of and I will always be taken care of, and really knowing that, in my heart, in my body, and um because it does show up in our body as well, this scarcity. It shows up so much in anxiety, form of anxiety, and physical, representations of it as well. um I was the person that would always, once I had money, I felt like, oh, I have to pay for everything for everybody, to the point where I felt like certain friends were taking advantage of that, and but I was such a people pleaser that I couldn't say no. So, anyways, those are just some simple examples. So, that's a little bit about little pieces of my journey without going into too much detail about it. But maybe you resonate, and please let me know if you do in the comments below, if you identify with anything that I've just shared, because I know that so many of us do struggle with this. So I'm going to share top books that really, really helped me, first and foremost books. And I also have like a journal prompt deck, which I used every single week to journal and really get insight into my relationship around money. So the very first book I ever read on this, and this has been so long ago that I've read this book. I'm not even sure that I can tell you, I can't give you a book review. I can't say, here was the big lesson of this book. But I can tell you that this book led to one of the first real decisions that I made with my money. That was my decision. Okay. So this is You Are a Badass at Making Money. Master the Mindset of Wealth by Jen Sincero, also author of You Are a Badass. Now, this one I read more than 2 years ago. This was way, way, way back. I read this probably in 2013. So we're talking 12 years ago. 2004, no, later than 2000. No, sorry, hang on. 2017. Okay, 2017. So this was right at the beginning of my journey whenever I realized that I had chosen a path to be an artist. And I had been a professional full time artist at that point for about 5 years. And I was in so many galleries and I was teaching workshops, and I looked like a successful artist, and I guess by some people's standards, I definitely was. However, the money was not good. I was making, you know, pre-taxes at most, maybe 50,000 a year at the best, and it was not getting better. It was actually getting worse. And so I was filing self-employed at the time, and that means that you're paying about 25% of that in taxes, right? Automatically, if not more, in taxes every year. And that's not including all of your costs, all of your expenses of being an artist, which is usually around 50% expenses, like most businesses. Okay. So if you think about that, if you think about the expenses, you're bringing in 50K gross revenue, but maybe you're only able to keep 25, 30K at most. And then you're paying 25% of that, in taxes because self-employment taxes are much, much higher than, being an LLC or owning, being instead of being self-employed, owning your own company. And so I was, oh my gosh, this was going on for years. And I started, I was probably making 25,000 a year. So you're talking $2,000 a month. And I started to have this realization like, whoa, I'm almost 40 years old and I'm going to be poor and broke as an old woman. I don't have a 401k. I don't have a retirement fund, and I'm doing everything I can do to earn a living as an artist. I am busting my ass day in, day out. I mean, you could not have met a more hardworking artist, right? So I was doing everything the way that I thought I was supposed to be doing it. I was, had that work ethic, from my parents, from my mom and my stepdad. That is one thing that they instilled in us. But unfortunately, working hard does not necessarily mean that you are going to have financial stability or financial security. And so I started to have this realization in my 40s like, oh goodness, I followed my heart and did what I love. But how am I going to support myself if anything happens to me, if I get sick, anything like that. So this was the first book back then that I read, which was You Are a Badass at Making Money. And I also simultaneously that spring signed up for a 100-day challenge. I can't remember the man's name, Gary something. Anyways, it was called the 100-day challenge, and it wasn't specifically around money, but I somehow stumbled on this challenge. This was in the early days of people selling courses online. And and so I signed up for that and I set myself a challenge. Could I make $25,000 in that 100 days and I was reading this book? So I brainstormed every possible way, within legal reasons that I could make $25,000 through my artistic ability, through either teaching or through selling my art. Not through, having a side hustle or whatever. I really wanted to see if it was possible for me to make half my year's income in 1 quarter. And I did, I was maybe $500 short or, under $1,000 short of the 25K. While I was reading this book, I related so much to Jen and everything that she was sharing. And it was kind of the first book that kind of woke me up to my upbringing and my belief systems around money. So I would say that's the first step is that you have to first have awareness around what your belief systems around money even are, you know. And most of these are just things that we have taken on from our parents or we've observed around us. So this was really the first book that kind of opened the door into this journey, into believing that I could make more money if I set my mind to it, and kind of shifting into that more abundance, mindset. The other interesting thing about this book that she talks about is her desire to buy an Audi vehicle, and this is another big turning point for me. And she was driving a Honda at the time, a Honda CRV, and CRV, is that what it's called? Anyways, I can't remember. What was so funny about that is that I had an Audi car, I think it was an Audi, on my vision board, right? Like I had made a vision board and all this stuff because like you're supposed to have a vision board, right? And what was I driving? I was driving a Honda Accord that I had paid cash for. And all my family all drove Hondas. Okay. So they believed in Hondas. They believe Hondas will never die. That is the best car to buy. Hey, that rhymed. And, you can drive it till it has hundreds and hundreds of thousands of miles on it. And so I realized, like, and I had bought this car on my own. My parents did not buy this car for me. And I realized, okay, the last two vehicles I had was Hondas, and I just paid cash for this car on my own. And I bought this car because of what my parents believe about cars. And so because of her sharing her story about, buying her Audi, and she was saying that she went and she test drove a used Audi and realized that the payments on this Audi would have been the same as her buying a new Honda CRV or whatever the case was. Can't remember the exact situation, but the story still sticks with me to this day. It's just one example of how reading somebody else's experience and them sharing it can really like transform your own perspective on it. Um, so because I had hit the goal of 25,000, I and was reading this book, I decided, you know what, I'm going to go and look for a new car. Like I'm sick and tired. I got to the point where I was sick and tired of driving that car around. I thought I am better than this. It was all banged up, dinged up. It looked like a drug dealer's car. The windows were tinted so dark. It was almost dangerous how dark the windows were tinted. And I never didn't feel good driving around in that car. I didn't feel abundant. I didn't feel rich. And I thought I can afford to do better than this. I can. And it was very hard for me, but I went and I traded in that car, and I didn't end up getting an Audi, but I ended up buying the vehicle that I still drive to this day. And it was a BMW X1. And I'm telling you, whenever I got in that, and I bought it used, but whenever I got into, because that's what I could afford at the time, and when I got into that car, I just fell in love with it. And I was like, Bond, James Bond. And driving that car made me feel so like empowered. And so I did this for myself. I picked this car based on what I wanted, based on what I liked. So that was kind of my first sort of empowering, purchase that just felt so good. And I think set me on the track to then make future decisions with my artwork, with my business, that were future empowered decisions that set me up for financial success. So fast forward several years later, and I've had this big growth in my business, but then it declined and contracted after COVID. And then this big, financial loss with this marketing agency happened. And so it kind of pushed me back into some of that, doing some of this work around money and abundance mindset. So here are some of the books that I have found most valuable over the last couple of years specifically. This one here, and I don't have all the books because I've donated some of them since then, but this one is a really old book. But oh my gosh, I think I've probably underlined almost every word in this book. This is called Money is My Friend by Phil Laut, Laut. Eliminate your financial fears and take your first steps to financial freedom. And I'll just show you like how much is underlined in this book. So this one that I have bookmarked is all about self-esteem and ways to, and he's talking about parental disapproval, and it says parental disapproval syndrome is the idea that love is something you must earn. Loving yourself while you are doing nothing is the ultimate practice of self-esteem. So one of his biggest challenges, or that he presents people with, is like taking a day to just not work and just lay around and do nothing. And in fact, like give yourself something nice, Um, anyways, this is such a powerful, powerful book. It says, get a massage, weekly. Give yourself the simple pleasures in life in abundance. Take a bath daily. Stay in bed all day once per week. These are things a lot of these practices I still do to this day. Go first class, right? Make your meal selections in restaurants by choosing what you want to eat without the consideration of price. Now, obviously, I think we all have to do this within, you know, reason, right? Like you don't want to be piling up your credit card debt in order to do these things. And he talks about all that too. Um, but for most of us with scarcity issues, with money issues and scarcity issues, it's really a fear that we're not going to have enough, and so we won't spend. We won't invest in things because we think it's too expensive or I can't afford it. And so anyway, so this is a fabulous book. And then also he has had a good friend that had an audiobook series that I listened to called Prosperity Consciousness. And again, it's probably from the 80s or 70s, but that's really a good book. Another book that made a big difference for me was called Money Drunk, Money Sober. And actually, it's by Julia Cameron, who, if you didn't know, has written a lot more books. I think this maybe was her very first book, and I don't have the copy here in my hand. So maybe we can put up an image or include a link there for it. But that was another really excellent book, and I really appreciated that it was written by Julia Cameron, who wrote The Artist's Way, who so many artists adore and love that book, but they don't know about her book on money and prosperity. And again, all of these books, the one I just shared with you and Julia's book, have really practical applications in them too, talking about budgeting and things like that. So it's not all just like woo woo, stuff. Anyways, and so another book that I love was called May McCarthy, The Path to Wealth. And this one is 7 Spiritual Steps for Financial Abundance. And you could also just see that as abundance. 7 spiritual steps for abundance, in your life in general. And this really has a very good morning practice in it, which I did every morning for probably over a year. And so this is really, really a powerful book and gives you a powerful morning practice. That one was very pivotal for me. The other book that I wanted to recommend is another kind of more spiritual perspective on money, which I found for me to be very mindset shifting for me. Was looking at money from a different point of view other than just practicality, I guess you would say. In trying to tap into some sense of faith and trust. And, the way I was raised in church and was raised to tithe and all these kinds of things. And so looking at things from a more spiritual perspective was important to me as well. So this book was called Relax into Wealth by Alan Cohen. And again, part of the topic was like challenging this belief that we have to just labor and work, just work hard and you will earn. You have to work hard and work in order to be worthy to have and to earn a certain level of money, right? That's another excellent book that I highly recommend. For business owners, in terms of practicality, I would say Profit First. If you have your own business, I highly recommend that you check that book out, Profit First. The other, why am I blanking on his name right now? I'm so sorry, the author, but just Google Profit First and you will find it. Oh, and he's so funny too. You can listen to talks that he gives, but basically it's a system of system of budgeting and allocating your money in your business so that you don't, get into trouble with your cash flow in your business, that you don't get into trouble, when it comes time to pay taxes, that you have enough money set aside for that. Even if you are filing self employed, this is very important to do that. Okay. So check that out if you're looking for really practical steps in terms of budgeting your money. It's not really going to help you understand how to grow your money necessarily, but that's more in money management. The other book that was very mindset shifting for me that I just recently finished, I bought it a long time ago, but I just recently listened to it. It's called Psychology of Money. Highly, highly recommend this book. Oh my gosh, it is incredible. So, the biggest takeaway for me from this book was like the fact that all of our money systems that are set up in the United States anyway are very new, right? So it really gives us a lot of understanding and compassion for ourselves, for not expecting ourselves to know how to master this thing called money when, first of all, if 401ks, Social Security hasn't even been around that long at all, right? Women couldn't even have their own credit card or get a loan or their own checking account as of like the late 70s, and that was right before I was born. Um, so the psychology of money, I think, is really empowering in the sense that it helped me feel like, oh, of course, I don't have this down pat. I don't have this mastered. Like most people don't even understand half of this stuff, that we're doing. It's so complex and so complicated a lot of times. Like taxes are so complex and complicated, right? That, you would have to be like a specialist in this area in order to be expected to do everything right with money. So, the other person I would highly recommend, the other book would be Ramit Sethi, Sethi. His book, I Will Teach You to Be Rich. That has both kind of philosophical and mindset work in there, as well as just really practical applications. A lot of his, system of allocating your personal money, I have, utilized. I'm personally utilizing in my life right now. And so I highly recommend that. A lot of that's around budgeting and saving and investing and how to go about that, the proper way, how getting out of debt if you are in debt. Um, okay, so, and then the last thing I wanted to recommend is something called Money Deck. This is a money deck by Girls Gone Happy. And don't let this light-hearted sounding money deck fool you. There is some really, really deep shit in here. So it's mostly like you pull cards, topic cards to give yourself journal prompts so that you can get more awareness around how you're showing up in regards to money and prosperity, how you're behaving with your money, what your belief systems are around your money, what your values are with your money, and really getting a lot of consciousness and a lot of awareness because we know for certain that if we're not aware of a belief that we have, we certainly can't change it. If we're not aware of a behavior that we're doing that is sabotaging us or harming us, we certainly can't change it. Um, so this little deck here, I highly recommend. There's also simple cards like sometimes we just don't take the time to think about what we want, right? So like this card is wishes, and this card is on risks. This card is on receiving. How good are you at receiving, right? That has been a huge, huge challenge for me. And when it comes to abundance, also thinking about it in bigger terms other than money, like how good are you at receiving help? How good are you at receiving assistance? How good are you at receiving compliments? That is a huge insight into your mindset around abundance and prosperity. So, I hope that these recommendations, hopefully one of them really kind of spoke to you and struck a chord with you. I highly recommend all of these and so much more. Too many here to mention, but these are the ones that I obviously still have in my possession, either on my Kindle or here on the bookshelf. So obviously they're important to me enough to continue to hang on to in case I want to revisit them. So without further ado, let me know in the comments below if you got anything out of this podcast, out of this video. Also, I'd love to hear from you. Let me know any further topics you would love to have me, share or talk about. You can really ask me anything, and I'm pretty much an open book, so I'm willing to talk about anything as well. You can Pardon me, you can email in questions or your big takeaways or requests for future videos to info@artlifewithkelly with an i.com. As always, also be sure to subscribe on the YouTube channel. I have a goal to hit 100,000 followers on my YouTube channel here. And so I am asking for you to subscribe and also share it out to others who you think might be interested. Ask and you shall receive, right? Like that is one of the fundamental tenets of prosperity and abundance. So, thank you so much for being here and for contributing and being a part of this conversation on Art Life Conversations. Until next time, wishing you happy creating. Bye for now.